Cori Lefkowith, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm super excited to have you.
Super excited to be here and talk about all things strength and fitness.
Yes. So I love to start the episodes with like rapid fire, this or that questions. So you ready for it?
I'm ready.
Okay, if you could only pick one, macros or intermittent fasting?
Macros.
Strength training or cardio?
Strength training all the way, baby.
All the way. I mean, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, you'd see her arms right now. I see the veins popping out. Wow. Incredible.
From the workout earlier.
Creatine or protein powder?
Protein powder.
Carnivore or vegan?
I love my meat. I gotta say carnivore.
Yeah. It's like you don't want to choose, but you have to, right? It's a would you.
I love my plant-based clients. I love them, but carnivore for me.
The meat. Okay. Barbells or dumbbells?
Dumbbells.
Chicken or beef?
Chicken.
Rice or sweet potatoes?
Sweet potatoes. And I've got to say, I'm buying up all the frozen sweet potatoes at Trader Joe's. Well, they have them right now. So
amazing. Okay. Do we need to get those too? Or do you have some recipes that you love with that?
They are so good. They're so easy too. I'm lazy. They're so easy.
Trader Joe's does make it so easy. Okay. Last one. We've got walking or running.
Walking.
Oh, I was interested in hearing what you said about this because I'm a big walker as well. I used to be a runner, but not anymore. Not a fan. Do you run at all?
I am not a runner. I played college tennis. I done the half marathon, gone that route, but I am not a runner. I like walking for all the aesthetic purposes, for the de-stressing, for the puppies, because they get out their energy, but I'm a walker all the way.
Yes, I love that. Okay, so what is your biggest fitness pet peeve and just something that you wish people would stop doing in 2024?
Quitting and blaming things outside themselves, because all we can ever do is control what we can control, and we can only control our own mindsets and actions, not all the other things that happen. And every time we quit, we're not moving ourselves forward.
What do you consider quitting?
I consider quitting to be something where you completely self-sabotage, you start blaming things outside yourself, you don't take ownership of what's going on, you don't reassess what is and isn't working. Because it's not that we don't stop programs to start something else, but so often we just say, I'm done. And then we go back into old habits, we fall back into old patterns, old mindsets, and then we feel like we're starting over. So it's almost more the statement of I'm starting over Monday that I dislike more than the quitting, because you're never starting over. It's not a video game where you just die, come back, and now you know where all the pitfalls are. You're constantly just moving forward. So everything you've done prior has an impact.
What do you feel like is the biggest reason why people quit?
We don't own our own reality. And we don't own our priorities, and it becomes like they become all of our excuses.
Let's talk about that more. I know this is supposed to be a rapid fire, but I feel like this is a really great conversation to go down. Because a lot of people, I'm sure you hear this from clients as well, they say something like, well, I just have always failed in the past. Why would this work for me? So what would you say to someone like that?
Why? One of the best questions you can ask yourself is why? Why have I always failed in the past? Why do I feel like nothing will work for me? And the more you start to dive into that, the more we realize we're catching ourselves in this change loop. We get really excited about a program, then we go all in with the habits, we hit habit overload. And then when we're feeling like the effort doesn't equal the outcome, all of a sudden it's like emotional sabotage. Why am I doing this? And then we quit. Instead of when we sort of have that emotional sabotage, that habit overload, being like, okay, well, what is working to double down on? So often when we feel like nothing will work, nothing can work for us, we have to really assess why we've always quit in the past. So the most important question we can use to really help ourselves break free of this cycle is why. Because often we think, oh, it's keto, I just love my carbs, and that's why. No, it's more than that. What other restrictive diets have you tried that constantly sabotage you because you're restricting, cutting out, following the same pattern, hitting the same hard, even if it's sort of under the guise of a different label?
Have you ever quit something?
Oh, I've quit tons of stuff. I've made more mistakes. I honestly think a lot of times the best learning experiences were from all those times that I did sort of mess up, have those setbacks. And from that, I've now learned to never quit, to always say, okay, this is just a momentary break. What can I learn from it to move forward? So I never consider myself quitting because I'm never starting over. I'm just moving forward from the setback, mistake, or blip now. Like any program I do, I don't ever not finish it because I want to learn from it as much as I can. So yes, I've quit in the past, and that has taught me not to quit because you're never starting over.
Did you consider quitting, just stopping something because it doesn't work for you in your lifestyle or the coach you're working with, or name any of those examples? Would that still be quitting if you wanted to just do something else?
Choosing to follow a different path is different than quitting because you're not going back. Quitting is the starting over. So, like, I really do feel like it's more the starting over that I dislike than the quitting. Because sometimes you do hit a fork in the road where you're looking at your results, you're looking at your progress, you're looking at how the habits fit your lifestyle now. And to keep going on this path would not match what you truly need. So you go on a fork in the road. So quitting is deciding that you're not going to learn from the experience, that you're not going to keep doing habits to move forward, that you're giving up on your goals, that you're believing that you don't deserve them or are not worth the effort. So quitting is almost more of even a mindset than just the actions. And it goes back to, again, the starting over, the catching yourself in that loop of just searching for another program to fix the same problem instead of owning there's something else going on to keep trying to move forward from what you've already learned.
Okay, so say you have a client that does want to quit with you. What do you typically do? Do you let them kind of choose their next path, or you're like, how can we figure this out? And what is your why behind this?
So if a client says, I quit, I sometimes will say back, no. I'll say there is no quitting. There's only learning and moving forward. And from there, I'll be like, why do you want to quit? Again, going back to that most important question ever, why? Why do you want to quit? Why do you want to stop? Why do you not want to keep going with these habits? Because the more you assess that, you start to realize, hey, you're hitting the hard point that you don't feel you can overcome. Or you're hitting a point where you don't feel like you deserve more. Or you're hitting a point where your lifestyle has evolved and the effort doesn't feel worth the outcome right now. And so there's always something else that leads to I quit. But if we never pause and assess at that moment, we're never going to see the results that we want. So I quit is just really the chance to reassess what's going to finally move you forward towards your goals.
How did you shift your mindset to this?
I would say it's making a lot of mistakes and now working with a lot of different people and just seeing that there is, I think sometimes we also feel alone. We think we're the only one that struggles, we're the only one that fails, we're the only one that, can't do something right away. And that's just not the case. And so now seeing it, I think, and even working with clients and wanting to ask them to do more, I really stepped back and started to assess my own patterns, my own beliefs, my own challenges where I would hit the hard and not want to push through. And so in wanting to ask my clients to do more, achieve more, be more, because I believed in them, I started to really sort of take a hard look at myself and be like, where am I repeating the same patterns? How can I mentally learn to push through to even then help them do it? What do I want to ask of them? Because if I want to ask of them something, I need to ask that of myself because I am 100% a believer in practicing what I preach. So I'm not going to ask someone to do something that I would not put myself in the uncomfortable position of doing. And, I'm not saying like lift the same weight that they lift or do the exact same challenges that they undertake because we're each going to be very unique. But at least understanding the mindsets, the struggles, the setbacks, how they feel, how it feels to even have that victory in that. I want to understand those things to help them. So in wanting to help my clients more, I really paused to assess myself. And I think what it came back to is, we're looking for macros, right? Usually when we're going to make a health or fitness change, we're looking for workouts, we're looking for diet and workout changes. But really, everything comes back to mindset changes and building that self-awareness of who and what we are and the ultimate lifestyle we want to lead. Because in getting the goal we want, it's shifting our identity. And that means shifting so much else in our lifestyle besides just our diet, just our workouts.
I noticed this when I was looking at your website right before this. It's right at the top of your page. It's you think that it's just fitness or you think it's diet and you think you have all these things, but really it comes down to this whole well-rounded approach. It's very holistic, and the best way to get there is with an accountability or with a coach to guide you along the journey. And that's why people do hire us as expert coaches to keep them accountable. And it is really helpful to have someone kind of along with you. But really, you are so right with it comes down to your mindset. Like in anything you want to do, right? Creating a business, moving, it's got to come here first. And if you say I can't do something, like how can you expect to actually do it?
You can't. Whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. And ultimately, your mindset dictates every action you take. And you can doom yourself with doubt, or you can believe in yourself to be able to conquer any hard challenge that you come to face.
I love that. And this was supposed to be rapid fire, but like I was like, she's got more in here. So okay, next one I have on my list is what trend do you think is a total load of shit right now in the fitness industry?
I'll be honest. I think anything that tells you that it is the only way, that it is the only right way, that you have to cut out everything else, I don't care what it is, that to me is something that you don't want to go down, because there are lots of fads that just basically get new labels every few years. And anything that is telling you nothing else is right, you have to do this and you have to do it only this one way, it's going to ultimately sabotage you.
It's so true. I said that, like, every time I ask this question, I was like, that's the first thing I think of is anytime I'm on Instagram and people are like, eat this, not that. Or they're in the grocery store and they're like, stay away from this. And I'm like, shut up.
Especially without that but, because there are going to be things we need to eliminate for health concerns that aren't right for our lifestyle. But if we don't see the nuance in it, the shades of gray that really exist on that continuum from like good to bad, and we just like label things in such a binary way, we don't see all the opportunity for ourselves, even as our needs and goals evolve. Because what worked for you when you were younger might not work for you when you're older, or might not work for you during the holidays, which works for you during January.
Yeah. And then you can put that and like put it on top of anyone that you see online. What works for Cori may or may not work for me or anyone else.
Exactly. We're all different.
Yeah. So what trend do you think that you see right now is actually worth the hype?
I always go back to macros, and just because macros are not one ratio, it's learning about the fundamentals of your fueling so that you can adjust even as your needs and goals change over time. So I would say they're not a trend. They're a nutritional foundation that we should have learned about in school. And I wish we learned about more in school. So
Yeah.
macros all the way for me.
Would you say you're more nutrition? Would you say you're nutrition and then fitness focused or the opposite?
It depends on the client I'm working with and what I'm personally working on, but I don't think you can do one without the other. I think all the systems have to work together. And if you find a perfect macro ratio, like what makes it perfect is all the other aspects of your lifestyle. What makes the workout perfect is all the other aspects of your lifestyle. So you really can't do one thing without the other. It's almost like you have a star player on your team, right? So I might be focusing a little bit more on the fitness side or the nutrition side with the client. But if all the other players on the team stink, you're probably not going to win the game. So everybody has to be at a certain level to really lift that star player up even further.
Okay. What do you think is the most underrated tool then for building muscle?
Workout design. I actually love that question because I think, we think macros, which fueling is really important if you want to build muscle. I think we think weights, but we don't think the variability in workout design and how we really design the actual workouts. We say, oh, we'll just do body part splits, or 8 to 12 reps of one move for 4 rounds. But there's so many different ways we can design workouts that work. And the more we even take advantage of different types of movements, different rep ranges, different rest, and use those workouts to our advantage, especially as we become a more advanced exerciser who maybe is kind of getting close to their ceiling with certain loads. Like the more we take advantage of that, the more we can see those gains still happen.
How long have you been a trainer for?
So let's see, over 15 years, about 15
Okay.
years.
Yeah. I've been a trainer for about 12. And program design is actually one of my favorite things too. Because I feel like I could do it in my sleep. But at this point, there's so much more to learn, especially when you get to work with like advanced or like intermediate to advanced athletes. Do you ever work with coaches yourself to learn from them?
I have a fabulous team of coaches who train with me, train for me. And
Okay.
so I'm always constantly picking their brains. I have dietitians that I work with. Like I want to, even if they don't technically have a certification they always have a perspective, because we each approach like an injury, training technique from a different lens because we've had different experiences. And so there's always something new to learn from somebody else. And sometimes, like I like to say, we need to be reminded more than we even need to be taught, but you need to be reminded of things at a different time in life where you're able to receive them in a new way sometimes. So I love like collaborating with other trainers, other dietitians, just because it really does help me see what I can't see or what I might even be like just skipping over a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. What's your one piece of advice to someone, woman specifically, who's maybe scared to take up space or build muscle?
Ask yourself why. I know I've harped on this question, but ask yourself truly why. Because I think a lot of times it comes back to assessing why we feel we don't deserve more or why we're afraid to ask for more. And some of it even relates back to growing up, we're told constantly to be humble, to not brag, to put down our accomplishments. We give more mental and even like verbal space to the negatives that we suffer, the setbacks. We're more willing to talk about the things that have gone wrong than the things that have gone right. And so I would really ask yourself, why do you feel you don't deserve more? Why do you feel like you have to sort of pull yourself back or not brag about your accomplishments? Because I do think that's taking up space. And the more we embrace taking up space, the further we go and the more we even lift other people up.
Why do you actually think it's easier to talk about the negative than the positive?
I think it's something that we're taught from a very young age. It's okay to say you did something wrong. And even other people, like we bring up a lot of times more with other people the things they've done wrong than the things they've done right. It's bragging, right? Oh, you're bragging, you're being too boastful about the things you've done well. And so we stop saying those things. And the negatives are also easier sometimes to believe. They have more power. So we let them take up more mental space.
Give me an example of something really positive you're super stoked on right now about yourself.
I am super stoked on the balance I found where this last weekend, as much as was the holidays, I did not actually go and just say F it and eat all the food in sight because I had goals for Thanksgiving. I've loved my lifting. I love how I could go on. I just brag about everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a fabulous team, which I guess is not really me, but I'm very proud of them. Like, I love celebrating those things because I think when you do, that positivity, that energy invigorates other people as well to want to find the good in themselves and to even feel that good. And when we get very negative, we don't realize how much we pull other people down because of the insecurities we're feeling.
That is so true. And it's awesome that you have that experience in that environment. And really, I like to think of it as like multi-level marketing of confidence. You're
Well,
sharing.
what about you?
Yeah.
Now I have to ask you.
Oh,
what
yeah,
are you
gosh.
stoked on right now?
To be honest, I launched a fitness app just last week. We're a weekend and it's awesome. I have a really great team. I'm super stoked on getting back to my lifts, and there's so much to be thankful and grateful for. And I'm just stoked to be able to work with clients all over the world as well. Because really the whole point is for that women to gain strength and be and feel awesome in their bodies. And I feel like we're both doing that for so many people. So
It's the best profession.
it really is the best. Like, and I can't even think, I mean, I've been doing this 12 years too. And I'm like, what else could I possibly be doing? You know, like there's nothing else. But speaking of how long we've been doing this, like I'm 35. I don't know exactly how old you are, but I feel like I look and feel like the best I have ever felt. I'm actually working out less. It's just a little bit more focused and intentional. And like my eating is it's very intuitive. It's very mindful. I don't do a ton of macros, but people are always like, oh, wait till you're this age. Or, oh yeah, it's because you're not in your 40s or 50s. Your metabolism is going to, slow down. Does that actually happen? What actually happens when you age? And like, what can we tell women that are older than us?
So, what is old? And I bring this up because I will have people tell me at 25, oh, my age is just getting me. And then I have people at 80 being like, I am feeling more fabulous than ever. I'm doing more things. So old is a state of mind. And old is also what we've allowed ourselves to get to. And I say this because I see clients at 20 unable to do exercises in the gym that clients at 80 are able to do. And part of it's how we take care of ourselves. And going to the metabolism question, it's the same thing with our metabolism. So much of what we just blame on age is honestly poopy dieting practices and training practices adding up. You even mentioned it. You're doing less and feeling more fabulous. You're fueling more. The more I own my lifestyle, the more I've seen clients own their lifestyle, really fuel their activity, train in a way that meets their needs and schedule, the more they see those results snowball. We've come to think like training and like eating well to achieve a certain aesthetic has to be like a full-time job. And that's the wrong attitude because that's the attitude that makes us feel like we can out exercise or out diet time and we can't. And that's where we see our metabolic health suffer. So as we get older, our body does change. Our metabolism does slow down because generally we're less active. We're losing muscle mass because we're not doing more things to build and maintain it. Our appetite goes down, which means we actually eat less. We're less able to utilize proteins efficiently. Again, we're not building muscle. But while we will see changes with age and hormonal changes of menopause and perimenopause and even into postmenopause, it's not something that it's just like, well, I'm screwed. That's it. I'm done. My metabolism is gone. I can't do anymore. I'm just getting old. It's not that at all. So many are just lifestyle factors and our previous dieting and training practices adding up. So we can reverse any metabolic adaptations we're seeing at any time.
Anytime. So I'm 6 years old. I come to you and you feel like you could reverse what I went through for 60 years of my life.
First, I thought you said 6, and I'm like, I hope your metabolism is not hurt at 6. But yes, at 60, I have clients retraining themselves to eat more. And that's what it is. It's retraining yourself to eat more. It's training your body to function better. It's building that lean muscle. It's improving those metabolic processes. But so often what's happened is we've underfueled. And in underfueling to try and diet down quicker, we've created an environment where our body is trying to survive. So it is and this is the least scientific way of putting it, but it's a mode of survival, or our survival instinct to try and match our energy output to our energy input. So if we're eating way under what our body feels it needs, then it is going to find ways to regulate down. So if you're trying to out exercise your diet, your body's like, okay, well, we have all this energy going out for training. Well, let's, slow hormone production. Let's slow these other processes. Let's not build muscle because muscle is metabolically costly. And so it takes more calories to be maintained. Let's fidget less. Let's actually grow hair and nails less. So all these other metabolic processes are slowing down to compensate. So yes, at 60, if you start eating the way that you need to eat, if you start paying attention to your macros based on your activity level, you can see that hormonal balance be restored. You can see all these processes upregulate. You can see your workouts improve. You can start to build muscle, and then muscle will help you burn more calories at rest, not only from the actual muscle, but all the other metabolic processes. And then you'll start to move more. And then in starting to move more, you're burning more calories at rest. So it's kind of this snowball that builds. And it does get harder from the standpoint of we have a lot of things to reverse. And the longer we've been doing those things, the longer it takes to reverse them. But also because we do utilize protein less efficiently, our hormone environment is not necessarily working for us in the same way it did when we were 20. And on top of that, we're, going to potentially be a more advanced exerciser. So we're going to have to find other modes of progression to keep trying to build lean muscle. And then if you add in our focus on the scale, that's a whole other ball of wax, which usually sabotages our muscle gains.
So you're talking about these like snowball things that we can like add up, and this happens and this happens. Like if we were to look at that from like a macro level, like how long would it take for someone to see some of those snowball real effects at an older age, putting that in quotes, but let's say it's 50 plus as a woman?
So I would argue it's not even the age. So it's not 50 plus, 40 plus, 60 plus. It's how long were you doing things that fought against it? How long have you been at your new weight? How long have you just been enacting the same poopy dieting and training practices? Because all those things add up. Like when clients ask me how long did it take you to see your results? My entire life. Because everything I've done prior has an impact on how I respond now. Everything I have done prior has an impact on how I embrace tools, tactics, have the mindsets to push through different costs or pain, right? So the annoying answer is it really depends, and probably far longer than you'd like. But if you've been doing things for 10 years to create these metabolic adaptations, if you've been really inactive, then you're going to take a lot longer to reverse some of those things. However, the less you've been doing, by just adding in a few small tweaks, you can see that momentum already building just because you've been doing absolutely nothing. So it's a very hard question to answer because so much is dependent on how long you haven't been doing the right things for yourself, but in not doing the right things, how much of a tolerance to certain things you've also built up. Because again, if you're an advanced exerciser and been struggling to build muscle because you're not fueling the right way, it's going to be harder just because in the gym, you've adapted to a greater training stimulus. So to create that stimulus on top to grow muscle, not only do you have to get that fueling correct, but you also are potentially going to have to create different modes of progression. And then on top of eating more, you've probably trained your body to function off of less, which means your appetite has probably become suppressed. So there's just so many different things to sort of work through, but you can put yourself on the road to improving your metabolic health very quickly by just starting to even track what you're currently doing and making one small tweak to either your macros or your calories while really creating that clear workout progression.
What do you feel like are some top myths that you hear about aging and metabolism, just in general?
Basically that you're doomed because you're getting older. And that's just it. That's the biggest one. I see a lot too with hormones and menopause. And menopause does make things difficult because your hormone levels are fluctuating daily. And so when you're seeing these different fluctuations, you're having to constantly adjust. But I think part of the biggest problem with feeling stuck, with feeling like we're just doomed, is that we also think there's only one right way and that we have to be perfect with everything. Instead of saying, hey, where am I realistically at right now? Not what worked for me in the past. What am I doing right now? What does my lifestyle look like? What are my mindsets? What could I do to make one change off of that I know I can sustain on the worst of worst days to move forward? So, I'm doomed because I'm old. I'm doomed because of hormones. I'm doomed because my metabolism slows down and I've broken it. Nothing's broken. Nothing's irreversible. We can always move forward. And even when we say I'm doomed, I'm kind of always questioning with clients like, hey, so telling yourself that, what does that do? If you take no action, of course you're doomed. But why not see what's actually possible for yourself? Because we don't know what's possible until we prove it possible.
And I mean, we can go back to that mindset shift of like, if you're saying you're doomed, you are doomed. If you can't do something, you're not going to do it. We go back to that
Mhm.
mindset shift.
It's true.
So what about people that say, they have a slow metabolism or, it's just because of this? Would you just go back to that like what is the why, or could it be something else that is like triggering them to not see those results that they want?
No one is doomed, but there is always a reason why we're not seeing results snowball. And I will argue that a lot of times it is our own misinterpretation of our data or lack thereof. And I think that's why I'm such a big advocate of macros, is because what gets measured gets managed. And so often we don't accurately see things. I can tell you that my portion of peanut butter dramatically changes based on how much I want peanut butter at that time. And so even knowing the portion now, it still gets distorted. So I need to measure those things to have that accurate picture. But we allow those little deviations. We allow ourselves to cut ourselves some slack. And in that, we often aren't really being honest with where we're at to make changes. So we feel like we're giving a lot more effort. And when we feel like these changes are so hard and the outcome isn't worth it, we stop making any of the effort. But we don't recognize that some of the effort we're giving. So like, let's just say tracking. Let's just say you're really against tracking. You're like, this is horrible to track, but I'm tracking. You could track and not truly make any changes. You could just be recording what you're already eating. And so if you're not making changes to your diet, you're not going to see a different outcome, but the effort feels like a lot because of this new habit. And so it's even assessing, why do I feel like I'm giving so much effort? Why is the outcome not there? And a lot of times we then realize, hey, I'm potentially not doing some of the habits. So I like to break down like what someone is actually doing with those things, but then really looking at diet and exercise. We say we have these hormonal imbalances. We have, thyroid issues or this or that issue, and therefore we can't see results. But we have to remember that all these internal workings come back to lifestyle factors that have an impact. Our hormones are built off of what we're consuming. The hormonal levels that we have are based off the other stressors that we're putting into our body. And while exercise is a good stressor, it is a stressor. So taking a look at those different things and how they're having an impact and being willing to do something different than what we've done is always key. Because so often we do cling to those previous dieting practices, things we think should work. And I can tell you we're seeing a lot of issues right now because of the trends that have been out there and people trying to stick to them because they're supposedly best for weight loss or this or that. And they've had negative impact.
So if you had a client that wanted to potentially track and do this macro, I was like, what is the time frame that people should be doing this? And are there any long-term effects on these calorie restrictions or following these macros?
So I want to be very clear here. Tracking is not restrictive because tracking is not telling you what to do with the data. Tracking is simply writing out what you're doing. And that's usually where I start clients because I think a lot of us do have a negative association with recording our food. I resisted it for the longest time because the first time I ever tried it, I cut my calories extremely low, cut all the foods I love. And why would I then like tracking? It was miserable, but I realized it wasn't tracking. It was the way I tracked and the other restrictions I put on myself. Because I also realized not tracking, I could be just as restrictive and deprive myself of just as many foods because I got into this, well, I have to eat clean to see results. So for me, tracking was really freeing because I could see that all foods were able to be included. I could see what my actual lifestyle balance was. And then I could make one small change, which for me, I love dessert. Every other diet I went on to try and see results, that would be the first thing I cut out because desserts generally are not the healthiest foods. And when I started tracking, I was like, I'm going to work at my dessert first and plan all the rest of my day around it. And when I started doing that, I started to see results. And now dessert isn't even as much of a non-negotiable as it once was for me. but I started to find my balance. So I would tell someone, start just tracking your average day to see that tracking isn't judging. It's not cutting your calories lower. It's not setting any specific macros. And once you've tracked your diet, you can choose one change to make. And a lot of times it isn't cutting your calories lower. Like with tracking macros, I'm honestly often working with clients to increase their calories or to add back carbs or to not fear fat or to love protein like they should. But we're usually working on nutrition by addition more than subtraction.
It's so helpful to hear that because I think so many times people think of macros or calorie counting or tracking and just in general as being this weight loss thing. It goes to this negative tract. And so it's helpful for you to even just say like, no, tracking is literally just data. It's all just data. Just like the workouts you do, the reps you put in, the weight that you use, like you will track that. This is just another data point of entry.
I had a client who was training for Ironman in the past and had trained for a lot of them. And she was like, I'm not tracking my macros. I'm like, so if I asked you to go do an Ironman and told you not to put in place a whole training progression, not to track your workouts as you were training for this competition, would you do that? Oh, no, I'd never do that. Tracking your macros is the exact same way. You need that data. And if you are training for a performance goal, you need to make sure that you're fueling, because if you're under fueling, you're not going to see the performance gains you want. You might not even realize you don't feel optimal in your workouts. Or if you're really trying to see an aesthetic goal, be it gaining muscle, losing fat, whatever else, you can often restrict far too much or add in far too much to not feel your best. Not to mention with menopause, when we see bloating or different gastrointestinal issues or even sleep disturbances, tracking our food can really help us navigate those different things and see what foods are serving us well and what aren't. And sometimes it's even shifted from previous years just because now with the hormonal shifts, there's a different impact.
I'm going to add one little caveat to this because a lot of my audience is very general population, potentially maybe wanting to change their body, but not necessarily super performance or wanting to like add or lose. Tracking can be a really great opportunity to see what you're eating, how much you're eating. I personally don't love to track. If you told me today, you're like, well, you have to, I'd probably say no. I'd be like, no, Cori, I'm not interested. If that's how we work together, like, no, thank you. I eat the same. However, I eat the same thing. If you asked me today, like, how much protein are you eating? I could tell you, but that's just because of my knowledge and how I have weighed my peanut butter before. I know what a chicken breast is. And so having just a little bit of background will take you so much further, even on this general population scale.
So I'd also argue, what's tracking? We also think of habits as one form of the habit, and it's not. So when I track with clients, it's visual portion guides, it's minimalist macros, it's not just macro cycling. There's lots of different forms of tracking something, just like we all budget differently, we all, track different activity trackers. There's lots of different methods of tracking. And the more we get into this binary view of this is what tracking is, this is what it isn't, I think we also hold ourselves back from implementing habits in a way that's sustainable for us. Just like clean eating. What's clean eating?
Yeah.
You ask a vegetarian, it's very different than a carnivore.
Yeah.
But the point is that we can find our balance with including foods we love and foods that we know are more whole, natural, and nutrient dense. But it's embracing some of the nuance to things and owning our current lifestyle to then shape habits that fit us over trying to force ourselves into a habit mold.
This is such a great opportunity to just put out there that there are just so many ways to do it. I mean, like even I think of journaling. I'm like, God, I hate journaling. I hate writing things down. But you know what I really like is doing voice notes. That's kind of a type of journaling. So what Cori's saying is so true. Like really finding that way of what tracking looks like does not have to be in MyFitnessPal. It does not have to be like super strict with the calories or macros that you're looking at. It can be in so many different ways. So that was a great point. Thank you.
But it's even too embracing that what you do at one point to even reach one goal isn't what you'll do to maintain your results. And so embracing that evolution, like over January, you might be like, I'm going for all whole natural foods. I'm super motivated. And then during the holidays, it's like, yeah, all the holiday cookies, please give them to me. And if you try and force the same dietary standards on one time of year on another, a lot of times that's where we do get into the self-sabotage of feeling like we don't have the willpower, just going off the rails versus saying, hey, I am going to focus more on quality fuel here and not as much right here. And that's okay because it keeps me overall consistent and feeling my best. So it is embracing that you might even track because you decide you really do want to get a little extra shredded. But then because that is something that feels like the effort doesn't equal the outcome long term, maybe as you transition to maintenance, watch your portions, you then stop tracking because you don't need to in the same way, or you go to visual portion guides or just protein minimums. But there's also a needing to embrace evolution. So I do think I see a lot of people going on diets like, keto is the lifestyle today, or vegetarian's lifestyle today, and I'm going to do this forever. It's so totally sustainable right now. But you don't know what your lifestyle is going to bring. You don't know how your priorities are going to shift. You don't know what other health needs you're going to have. And the more you're open to other options and opportunities over getting married to one tool or tactic, the more you're truly going to move forward constantly.
This is also like living in that gray, right? There's this balance of being on one side or the other, but then there is this middle piece that is really valuable and important. So, if we were, let's dive into like a little bit more like if somebody did want fat loss or they did want to change their body composition, do people need to go low carb or have a specific type of way to actually get those results, or really just depends on the person?
The annoying answer is it always depends on the person, because if you are very active and you go low carb, you're probably going to sabotage yourself. You're going to see your energy tank. You might see hormonal imbalances pop up. But if you're less active, going low carb might be a great way for you to go. And even if you are more active, I have some of my clients that at points we will go lower carb just to deplete those glycogen stores before adding back in carbs to get that little whoosh effect where fat cells will release water because of the increase in carbohydrates, and they're not depleted any longer. But we'll even use cycles of ratios. So I think it's even realizing that even if you find something that works for you, you might cycle it in with other things, because a lot of times those differing ratios, those differing macros, using different energy sources can work to your advantage as well. But I will tell you, no matter what you do, you first need to track your current lifestyle, because you're mentally and physically going to resist big changes. And if you don't own where you're at right now and even plan in some of the foods you love first, you're never going to stick with anything long term.
How much does protein actually affect your metabolism?
Well, I am a protein fiend, and everybody I work with is a protein fiend because protein is super essential. Not only is protein like the building blocks of all the tissues, your body, muscle mass, and we don't use it as efficiently as we get older. So when we're blaming, slower metabolism on our age, it's because often we're not building that lean muscle because we're not utilizing protein as efficiently. So we do need more of it. And the more active we are, the more turnover we have of that muscle tissue, the more we want to make sure that we're getting our muscles what they need to repair. So I will tell you, from a muscle building standpoint, which is key to our metabolic health, protein is super important. Also, it makes us feel fuller and more satisfied. It keeps us from eating things that probably aren't generally as healthy for us. A lot of protein sources also have micronutrients, and protein has a higher thermic effect, which means it takes more calories to be digested, which is already a metabolic boost as well. So I would say if you're going to focus on one thing, and if I'm having clients make one change, I don't even adjust their calories to start. I even try and keep their calories as high as possible and just increase protein.
I love that you're the protein fiend. I feel like I've had so many podcasts literally just about protein. So let's give some protein hacks. How can people ensure that they're getting enough on a daily basis?
Don't overcomplicate it. And plan ahead. So a lot of times we won't plan ahead and we eat the same portions we've always eaten. And guess what? The portions you are eating are not different to hit the new macros that you're trying to hit. And so if you eat the way you've always eaten, you're going to hit the same numbers you've always hit. So you have to plan ahead. Otherwise, you're going to end up chowing down a chicken at the end of the day. And I'm sorry, but that does not sound like a tasty dessert to me. So I would plan ahead and take what you normally do in a day and say, hey, where can I add 1 ounce to the protein source I'm already consuming? Don't overcomplicate it. Don't look for new recipes. Don't try new meal prep. Just say, hey, I'm already having chicken on my salad and I have 3 ounces. I'm going to have 4. From there, think about fun ways. So I loved being like, what are non-traditional protein sources? Okay, well, I could put edamame in my stir fry with my chicken. Or, hey, I don't want more chicken in my stir fry. Why don't I try shrimp or beef and start combining things in that way? But we don't often recognize the way that grams truly add up over the day. Things like nutritional yeast, Parmesan cheese, swapping even types of Greek yogurt. As weird as it sounds, like you can find Greek yogurts with a vastly different amount of protein in them and use that to your advantage as well. So start to be creative and have some fun finding new options. Like I even like testing out different protein flavors. Some are gross, some are amazing, but that even makes it fun. But I would say start with your average day and start to make tweaks off of it versus trying to reinvent the wheel.
I love those. And one of mine that I love to say is like the planning. I know you kind of talked about this too, but like I say at least 30 to 40 grams per meal for me to get 150 grams. I'm like, I need at least 30, 35 is where I want to be. And that way my meals are kind of planned around that. So that's a really great example to just be like, all right, well, at least now I have 40 grams per meal. That's 120. 30 is easy. It's just a Greek yogurt or a Chomps bar or something on the side.
And I love planning ahead because, as I mentioned, I love my dessert. And
Yes.
I have not yet found a dessert that is protein centric that is really that delicious. I have macro friendly ones I swap in that are satisfying enough,
Yeah.
but there's sometimes something that you can't replace. And I love peanut butter and chocolate together and Oreos. And I have not found a satisfactory protein variation. So if I really want one of those things, I'm going to plan those in first. And then if that means that one meal, I do have to make a sacrifice and have chicken and veggie, which is not my favorite meal, I will still have that, even if it's a little bit more bland and boring for my overall balance, because to me, that cost is worth the reward of that other thing. So the more you even plan ahead, you can then plan backwards to make sure that you're getting in things you truly enjoy.
Have you tried Yasso bars yet?
I actually really do like those. I do. And I like Halo Top and putting things in that too. Like you can make great sundaes with it. So there are some very good options out there.
But it's not the same. I get it. I'm a dessert. I eat dessert every night, but Yasso bar is my favorite because it is Greek yogurt, right? It's not I love ice cream. It's not ice cream, but it's close. But it's the chocolate crunch caramel with it that makes me feel like it's like a real dessert.
Well, even off of that, I love Rice Krispie treats and I love making a whole pan of them with frosting on them. But I know if I make the whole pan with frosting, I'm going to eat far too many of them. And on some days I am a-okay with that. On some days I'm not as okay with that. And so I even found getting the individually wrapped ones helped. It was this instant thing of, oh, I pull one out, that's it. Or if I want to get candy, I will have the candy and I'll freeze it, which kind of is ridiculous because the frozen candy tastes amazing. But for some reason, getting it out of the cabinet into the freezer, I'm like, well, it lasts forever now. So I don't have that temptation to go back for more than I want to plan in. So it's even thinking about some of those hacks as you're planning your balance.
Okay, so let's finish off this metabolism talk with fitness because obviously that's what both of us love as well. What is the best way to work out to really rev our metabolism up for fat loss?
I would say you cannot ignore the importance of building muscle. So therefore, strength training is super key. I think sprinting has its part. I think walking has its part. I think if you love steady state cardio, you can include it. But if you are not focused on strength work and building lean muscle, you are not going to see the metabolic payoff that you really want.
I mean, strength training is the best. Like, can we just agree on that?
I like it. And I like to lift weights faster as my cardio. That's kind of, I think the joke with that. But I love strength training too.
Honestly, I consider cardio walking lunges.
They are very cardio. I've started to do like Muay Thai and some kickboxing stuff and boxing, and I love that as well. But walking lunges are very, very cardio.
Yeah, they just make my heart rate go so high. Okay, so why is doing more cardio not actually the solution if you wanted to lose weight?
So steady state cardio, thinking about those long endurance runs and rides at a certain intensity where you're getting a little out of breath and you're pushing hard and it's not that walking pace where you can talk, it's casual. That is actually more catabolic to muscle mass. And if you're going to do those things, if you're like, I am a runner, I am an endurance athlete, Cori, you are not going to tear away my runs. Okay, let's own it, but let's design your strength workouts to be less metabolic. Let's make sure that your fueling accounts for that with higher carb, making sure you're getting enough protein as well. So you can make it work, but all in all, if you're really driving towards fat loss and body recomp and want to gain that lean muscle, it is going to be more catabolic to your muscle mass. It's going to deplete your glycogen stores and make it harder to rebuild any muscle tissue damage from your workouts and lifting sessions as well. So it's just an overall activity that kind of lends itself towards depletion and not towards that growth.
Do you have any workout tips that you could give someone who really wants to just optimize their metabolism?
Lift heavy and don't fear a combination of reps. So heavy is one of those things people ask about, right? Well, how do I lift heavy for fewer reps, lighter for more reps? You're never lifting lighter, or you're never lifting light. You're lifting lighter because the reps are higher. And so you can't necessarily physically lift the same weight you could for 5 reps for 15, but you always want a weight that challenges you for whatever rep and set range you're doing. So I would say lift heavy, but focus on a diversity of rep ranges and don't cut out rest. We get very married to just, heavy barbell lifts for 5 reps or 6 reps, or we work in only the 8 to 12 rep range. We fear going higher with 15 to 20 reps, or we only do compound moves, never isolation. But you need a combination of all of these different things. Even sometimes going with lighter loads and using other forms of progression as you get into those heavy rep ranges. And one of the training techniques I think is so valuable to gaining muscle is rest pause technique. And this can be implemented in so many different ways, cluster sets, different rep designs. But basically what you're doing is you're doing the reps you can to basically failure with a weight, then you're pausing for just 15 to 30 seconds at max and finishing out that set on that same side with the same weight or just the same move. And by doing that, you're pushing a little bit past failure, but you're really making sure you're getting a quality work with a load that you couldn't do for that many reps otherwise. But you can use this technique in so many different ways, but it's a great way if you're an advanced exerciser to make sure you're truly pushing to the point that you're going to create that progression and make your muscles have to adapt and grow.
Rest, pause, drop sets, clusters. Would you feel like, and we can, tell people what those things are, but do you feel like a lot of those are for more advanced, or could like an intermediate lifter do some of those types as well?
I would use them in different ways, but they're actually for every level, just different implementation. So rest pause technique might be used for an advanced lifter to push heavier weights when they can't necessarily do more reps with the weight in a row. Because if you rest longer than in between sets, you're not creating the same training density. But it can even be used for beginner lifters to be able to make sure that they're doing the same weight on both sides, to feel even confident in being able to lift a little bit heavier, like especially cluster sets and that rest pause technique. When you're doing cluster sets, you're basically breaking down a set of, say, 8 reps into mini sets. So if you're nervous, your form is going to break down on a deadlift because you're working on going heavier with it. Instead of trying to do 8 reps in a row and potentially losing that mind-body connection, letting form break down, you could say, I'm going to go a little bit heavier. Know I could do potentially 3 or 4 reps with it and only do 2, then pause. Then do 2 and pause and do that 8. So a weight that you would fear doing for 8, you can manage to do 8 reps with because you're breaking it down into those mini sets to really focus on quality of form. So that's the way it could be implemented with beginners. So I think these techniques can have great implementation across the board. It's just always making sure that we're using each thing based on what we actually need, not just because someone said, rest pause technique. Okay, I'm going to do it on every single exercise, every single day of every single workout for the rest of my life. We need to make sure that everything is truly meeting us where we're at.
Yeah, I love that. And there's just so many different variations of meeting you where you're at in your program. I personally have been loving clusters for pull-ups recently because I'm just trying to get more in a row. And so exactly what you said with the deadlifts is like, okay, if I can do 3 and then rest for 20 or 30 seconds and another 3, it's like, okay, then I can get to that 15 in a row and then just slightly shorten the rest in between.
Yeah, I've loved using rest pause where I've done some compound burners. So I've done a compound exercise like a reverse lunge. And then after that, I've done the isolation exercise just to target glutes, just because that isolation exercise can pay off for gaining muscle, especially the more advanced we are, because we can't necessarily take a muscle to fatigue as close to fatigue with the compound movement. But by doing the reverse lunge for like 6 to 8 reps with really heavy weights, and then right after going for like 15 to 25 reps with even something as simple as a fire hydrant to really target the glutes, I find that I get to like 15 sometimes and I'm like, woo, I feel that burn and I want to stop. And I'll be like, nope, you got to do at least 5 more, and I'll eke out 5 more. And just getting in that extra volume and pushing a little bit past failure with that like rest pause technique, I found that it's been amazing for the strength gains.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it gets more fun the more advanced you get, but like just giving this to people that maybe aren't as advanced yet, like I promise it gets more fun than it is.
But even using them early on, I think is really key, because I do think it's like, even think about the push-up, right? Oh, well, I can't do a full push-up off my toes, so I can't do all the fun variations. So we do only the incline push-up and we just do the basic variation. No, try some of those other variations off the incline. The more you work in that diversity over your weekly schedule, over your progressions, the better you're going to like feel and the better results you're going to see, because you're targeting muscles in different ways, and that can drive muscle growth. Like we can use the same but different to create progression. So I would definitely tell you, even if you're starting out, while you want to really hone in those basics and you're never above those basics, so even as an advanced trainee, you need to go back to them, add in some of those fun things that you want to test out. Just make sure they're implemented in a way that fits what you actually need.
Yeah, and as well, just like moving your body in joyful different ways. I think that's a huge piece of this as well, is like, yes, do the exercises to get stronger, but also like have fun trying different variations, but also just like moving your body in different ways that you didn't expect you even could, which is really cool. So this is towards the end of our episode. I feel like we could talk about a lot of this all day, but I just want to ask you a couple like last questions that I ask all of the guests on here. What is your favorite high protein snack?
I've really loved these high protein coffee protein powders that I've found,
Okay.
which I got really into coffee protein shakes for a while where I was making my own with like just protein powder and coffee. And then I had a very bad experience where I made a very bad ratio. It's not good. But then I found these, so I've loved that. I also like these Pro Mix bars, which are basically protein Rice Krispie treats. Again, dessert.
Yeah, I love dessert too, so I'm a big fan. What's the coffee protein shake you're talking about?
I want to say, I'm going to probably mispronounce the name, Chike, Chike.
Okay.
I found them on Amazon. So they've been really good and I've liked all the different flavors. So I definitely recommend those. And I love putting it with Fairlife milk and even like blending it up and making a little milkshake out of it.
Yeah, Fairlife is great. It's a nice addition to I have overnight oats every morning, and it's like Fairlife and oatmeal and yogurt, and it's like already just that, even without the protein powder. I'm like, oh, this is great for the day already.
Protein hack, right?
Yeah.
Changing up the type of milk you're using.
Yeah. What's your go-to supplement for building muscle?
I honestly don't have one. And I feel like too often we go to a supplement for building muscle over first adjusting your macros. And so for me, it's always, am I hitting my macros? What feels sustainable to hit my macros with my lifestyle balance right now? So for me, protein, macros, that's it. The thing I use most often would be protein powder.
And then what is one small habit someone can adapt today that will have a huge impact on their life?
Write down what you're eating today. That's the best way to understand your lifestyle to make one small change. Because I could tell you increase your protein, I could tell you increase your calories, lower your calories, add more vegetables. None of it matters because none of it's based on what you're actually doing and what's a small change that would meet you where you're at. So if you track what you're doing today, just write it down. I don't care if you weighed out your food, didn't weigh out your food, just write it down and say, hey, here's one change based on what I did that I know I can do tomorrow. Maybe it's drinking one more water bottle of water. Maybe it's adding in one more serving of vegetables. Maybe it's, adding 1 ounce of protein to one meal. Think about one small thing that is so silly, simple, and easy that you could do it no matter what came up in your day.
I love that. By the way, I'm still looking at your veins in your arms.
I think it must be warm in here. It must be very warm.
Damn, she got an upper body pump session today. Did you?
I did have an upper body workout on the docket for today and got some stuff in earlier with filming especially.
So if you're not watching this on YouTube, make sure you watch it now so you can see her incredible arms happening. Where can people find you online and hear from you and learn from you?
Everything Redefining Strength on YouTube, Redefining Strength, Instagram, Facebook, all Redefining Strength.
All everywhere. Okay.
Everywhere. Redefiningstrength.com.
I love it. I was telling you before we started, I've been following your stuff for so long and you just put out such great content. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. And any last words for our audience?
It's been my pleasure. Guys, don't give up. Stop blaming things outside your control. Focus on what you can change and make those changes small. Meet yourself where you're at. There's no ideal.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.